Maranello, January 2026. A seven-time world champion walks into the most pressure-cooked garage in motorsport, and the walls start closing in immediately. Lewis Hamilton didn't just join Ferrari to finish his career in red. He came to rewrite history. But after 12 months of radio silence, miscommunication, and a relationship so broken it was declared unsalvageable, the dream was dying before it even began. Then Ross Brawn spoke, the man who architected the most dominant eras in Formula One history. And what he said about Hamilton in 2026 wasn't just analysis, it was a prophecy. Because if Brawn is right, we're about to witness the return of something F1 hasn't seen in years. A vintage Lewis Hamilton. The question is, can Ferrari actually give him the machine to do it? Let's start with the brutal truth. Hamilton's first year at Ferrari was a technical disaster, the most significant bottleneck. His relationship with race engineer Riccardo Adami, completely broken down. Since 2013, Hamilton's success was built on Peter Bono Bonington, a partnership that operated almost telepathically. But at Ferrari, the radio transcripts revealed a profound disconnect. Whether it was engine braking calibration or energy deployment timing, the exchanges were testy, frustrated, misaligned. Brawn himself called it unsalvageable. And here's why that matters. At this level, even a 1% drop in communicative efficiency results in measurable lap time loss. But that was just the start. Hamilton's performance in the ground effect era has been an anomaly. While he secured 2 wins in 2024, his average qualifying deficit fluctuated wildly. By 2025, for consecutive Q1 exits, 0 podiums. Ferrari's response was drastic. They moved Adami to a back-office role and started searching for a new lead engineer for Hamilton. With the first preseason shakedown approaching, Charles Leclerc's engineer Brian Botzi was doubling up temporarily. Translation: Lewis Hamilton, the 105-time race winner, was entering a regulatory revolution without a permanent voice in his ear. This wasn't just a setback. It was chaos. And this is where Ross Brawn's vision gets interesting. Because Brawn's optimism isn't rooted in 2025, it's rooted in 2026. The new regulations bring a monumental shift, a 50-50 power split between the internal combustion engine and the energy recovery system. The removal of the MGU-H, a 350 kilowatt MGU-K. Energy management becomes a primary driver skill, not a background automated process. And according to Brawn, this intelligence-led driving suits Hamilton's experience perfectly. When the car becomes a puzzle of harvesting and deployment, the veteran driver who's seen multiple engine eras finds the clever solutions that younger drivers, raised on pure downforce, might overlook. Sounds perfect, right? But here's the twist. While Ferrari scrambles to rebuild Hamilton's engineering structure, Red Bull Ford may have already found a loophole that could blow the entire 2026 grid wide open. The FIA mandated a maximum compression ratio of 16:1 for 2026 power units, down from the current 18:1. The goal? Control costs and complexity. But reports surfaced of a clever interpretation. Some manufacturers, rumored to include Red Bull Ford, may have found a way to exploit thermal expansion. Here's how it works. Achieve the 16:1 ratio at ambient temperature during inspection. But once the engine heats up during a race, the physics of thermal expansion pushes that ratio higher, bypassing the FIA's efficiency ceiling. Brawn's reaction? He described it as a clever interpretation rather than a breach of the rules. Classic engineering pragmatism from the man who brought us the 2009 double diffuser saga. Brawn knows that in Formula One, the regulations aren't a wall, they're a series of hurdles to be navigated. If a manufacturer has found a way to manipulate compression ratios through temperature variation, they've discovered a way to unlock horsepower that shouldn't technically exist. And Brawn's suggestion that rival teams are using attack as the best form of defense reveals something critical. The paddock is already in a state of high alert. The FIA held a meeting on January 22nd. Technical experts from all manufacturers gathered to define exactly what ambient temperature means in the context of the 16:1 limit. It sounds like dry academic debate, but in F1, a 0.5% increase in compression efficiency translates to several tenths of a second per lap. This isn't noise. This is the technical Cold War that will define 2026. and Hamilton is walking straight into it. So what does this mean for Lewis? First, Ferrari's timeline is brutally tight. The Melbourne season opener on March 8th is the hard deadline for Hamilton to have a functioning rapport with his new race engineer. If Ferrari enters 202.5 still experimenting with who talks to Lewis on the radio, they're wasting the final year of current regulations, a year that should be a high-speed laboratory for the 2026 partnership. Second, the 2026 cars will feature active aerodynamics, movable front and rear wings, driver-controlled overtake mode and boost. Unlike DRS, which is binary, the 2026 Aero requires sophisticated understanding of car balance. A driver needs to decide exactly when to shed drag to save energy and when to load the wings for cornering stability. Brawn believes this complexity favors Hamilton's analytical approach. And third, the psychological factor. At 40 years old, Hamilton needs more than just a seat. He needs a sniff of a title. If the 2026 Ferrari power unit shows even a hint of being the class of the field, the psychological impact alone could be worth a few tenths. Brawn has seen this before. A rejuvenated driver can find a level of performance that defies age. The synergy between a clever engine interpretation and a motivated Hamilton is exactly what Ferrari is banking on to end their long title drought. This wasn't just a race engineer swap. It was Ferrari clearing the decks for a final championship assault. And the man who built the Mercedes and Ferrari dynasties sees a path back to the summit. Scenario 1. Ferrari nails the 2026 power unit. Hamilton finds his new Bono. The vintage form returns, and Lewis Hamilton claims his 8th world title in Italian red. Scenario 2. The engineering relationship never gels. The Ferrari remains fast, but inconsistent. Charles Leclerc becomes Ferrari's chosen one, and Hamilton's legacy ends in frustration. Scenario 3. Red Bull's thermal expansion loophole proves legal. They dominate 2026, and Hamilton's final shot at glory vanishes into the wake of a car that technically shouldn't exist. So here's what we don't know yet. Can Ferrari build a 2026 car that matches Hamilton's ambition? Will the FIA close the compression ratio loophole, or let the engineers play? And most importantly, can a 40-year-old driver who just endured the worst season of his career truly come back and challenge for a title? Ross Brawn thinks so. But in Formula One, belief and reality are separated by thousandths of a second. The vintage Lewis is there. He just needs the Italian machine to stop fighting him and start firing on all cylinders. Because if Brawn's prophecy comes true, 2026 won't just be another season. It'll be the greatest comeback story Formula One has ever seen. If you made it this far, you already know, this season's not about who's fastest. It's about who survives the politics, the engineering wars, and the pressure. So tell me, do you believe Ross Brawn's prophecy, or is Hamilton's Ferrari dream already over?